Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our series on Life 3.0. My name is Mathias Risse. I'm the director of the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy. Many of you will know that we have been doing this series for a number of years now. The title Life 3.0 we take from a wonderful book by Max Tegmark, characterizing the kind of life that might emerge if there is an intelligence explosion of sorts. The series is dedicated to the ethical and human rights related challenges broadly conceived that come with technological innovation, quite regardless of whether there actually will be an intelligence explosion in the near or medium future or ever, because one thing that is for sure is that there is a lot of these ethical and human rights related challenges around technological innovation already, and indeed regardless of where exactly this trajectory will take us. I am delighted to be here today with Bruce Schneier, a distinguished colleague here at the Harvard Kennedy School, who will be talking about the coming AI hackers. That's the title, the coming AI hackers. This is the first series. This is the first episode in our series for this year. It wasn't quite meant to be this way. Some of you might remember that a couple of weeks ago, we actually, for the first time in this series, had a technical problem and actually couldn't pull off the webinar with Gina Neff from the University of Cambridge, but we have rescheduled that now. But for this reason, this one actually turns out to be our webinar with Bruce Schneier. It turns out to be the inaugural one for this year. Bruce Schneier obviously will be a name to many of those who are watching or following our series and are watching this particular episode. Bruce Schneier is a incredibly well-known security expert, largely also, well, partly because of his blog Schneier on Security, which has been a fixture in the lives of many people who care about cybersecurity for many years. But he is also well known for quite a number of very insightful books around the security domain. And one thing about his books is they have very descriptive, colorful titles. So actually one way of saying a few things about Bruce is just to read some of his book titles, and that will locate him in the spectrum of intellectual activity. There was once Liars and Outliers, Enabling the Trust That Society Needs to Thrive. That I think is about 10 years or a bit longer ago. Then we have Secrets and Lies. So the lies theme is continues to be present. There are Secrets and Lies, Digital Security in a Networked World. Somewhat later, then here's my favorite title: Click Here to Kill Everybody. Click Here to Kill Everybody: Security and Survival in a Hyper-Connected World. And then in 2016, we got Data and Goliath, the hidden battles to collect our data and control your world. So that came out, and at least I'm looking at the paperback version that came out in February 16. So probably the hardback was a bit earlier. And now Bruce has a forthcoming book, and that one is called A Hacker's Mind: How the Powerful Bend Society's Rules. Okay, you have it already as a kind of preprint, and how to bend them back. So the date that I see here, it's going to be available in February 2023. And the title, of course, of today's talk, The Coming AI Hackers, draws on that book. So I guess we get a bit of a preview to what is going to appear in that book. I'm about to turn over to Bruce now, but let me also just remind you, the audience, as always, what we'll do next is, so once Bruce has given his talk in about 30 minutes, Sushma Raman, the executive director of the Carr Center, and I will pop back up, and we'll start a conversation with Bruce. And you are very much encouraged to put your questions in the YouTube chat function, and we will be monitoring that and bring your questions in as much as possible. So we very much encourage you to follow along and put down these questions. But now, without further ado, over to Bruce Schneier, who will be talking to us about the coming AI hackers.
So thank you. Thanks for that introduction. And yes, this is work that will appear in this book, which they told me is coming out in January. So I need to talk to them if you think it's February. What I want to talk about is AI hackers. Not hacking AI, but AI systems as hackers. So I think that artificial intelligence will hack humanity unlike anything that's come before. I think AIs will find vulnerabilities in all sorts of social, economic, and political systems, then exploit them at an unprecedented speed, scale, and scope. This is not just a difference in degree, it's a difference in kind, and it'll culminate in AI systems hacking other AI systems, with humans being little more than collateral damage. Okay, so maybe this is a bit of hyperbole, but none of this requires far future science fiction technology. I'm not postulating any singularity. I'm not assuming intelligent androids. I'm not even assuming evil intent on the part of anyone. Most of the hacks I'm going to talk about don't even require major research breakthroughs in AI. They'll improve as AI gets more sophisticated, but we can see hints of them in operation today. And this hacking will come naturally as AIs become more advanced at learning, understanding, and problem solving. So first, let's generalize the term hacking. So the tax code isn't computer code, but it's code. It's a series of algorithms with inputs and outputs. Those are the tax rules. That code has vulnerabilities. We call them loopholes. That code has exploits. We call them tax avoidance strategies. And there is an industry of black hat hackers that find vulnerabilities in the tax code. Those are tax accountants and tax attorneys. So what is a hack? The definition I use is something that a system permits, but is unanticipated and unwanted by the designers. Or maybe this, a clever, unintended exploitation of a system, which one, subverts the rules of that system, two, at the expense of some other part of that system. So it's a subjective term. It encompasses a notion of novelty and cleverness. It's a subversion or an exploitation. It's unintended and unanticipated. The hacks follow the rules of a system, but subvert its goal or intent. And all systems of rules can be hacked. You can find hacks in professional sports, in consumer reward programs, financial systems, politics, in lots of economic and political social systems. So a curved hockey stick is a hack. We know the name of the hacker who invented it. Mileage runs in airline frequent flyer programs are a hack. The filibuster was originally a hack back in Roman times. Hedge funds are full of hacks. But a system is just a set of rules or norms, right? The rules aren't always formal. And even the best thought out sets of rules will be incomplete or inconsistent. It'll have ambiguities. It'll have things the designers haven't thought of. And as long as there are people who want to subvert the goals of a system, there will be hacks. And AIs are becoming hackers. So in 2016, DARPA held an AI Capture the Flag event. This is a game that is a staple at hacker conferences around the world. Normally, human teams compete to defend their part of the network and attack other teams' networks. Capture the flag on computers. This was an event done by AIs. There were 100 teams that competed. 7 finalists faced off at the hacker conference, DEF CON 2016. And for 10 hours, the AIs hacked the other team's computers and defended their own. And an AI called Mayhem 1 came out of Carnegie Mellon. It's now a commercial product. AIs are also finding vulnerabilities in software. This is ongoing research. And if you think about it, it is something that an AI is suitable for. It's a lot of data, looking for patterns, trying to find things that are not obvious. I mean, the systems are mediocre, but they're getting better. But the implications of this go far beyond computer networks, to vulnerabilities in the tax code, to vulnerabilities in the financial regulations, to vulnerabilities in all sorts of social, economic, and political systems. And there are really 2 different issues here. The first is that an AI might be instructed to hack one of these systems. Or you can imagine someone feeding an AI all the world's tax codes or all the world's financial regulations with the intent of it creating a slew of profitable hacks. The other is that an AI might naturally, albeit inadvertently, hack a system. Both are dangerous, but the second is more dangerous because we might never know it happened. And this is because of the explainability problem. So in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, There's a race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings that build the universe's most powerful computer, deep thought, to answer the ultimate question to life, the universe, and everything. And the answer is 42. And deep thought was unable to explain its answer or even what the question was. That's the explainability problem. Modern AI systems are essentially black boxes. Data goes in one end and an answer comes out the other. And it can be impossible to understand how the system reaches conclusions, even if you're a programmer, even if you look at the code. AIs don't solve problems like humans do. Their limitations are different than ours. They'll consider more possible solutions than we might. More importantly, they'll look at more types of solutions. They'll go down paths that we simply have not considered, paths more complex than the sort of things that humans generally keep in mind. So in 2016, the AI program AlphaGo won a 5-game match against one of the world's best Go players. This is something that shocked both the AI and the Go playing worlds. AlphaGo's most famous move was move 37 in game 2. And it's hard to explain without delving deep into Go strategy, but it was a move that no human would have ever chosen to make. In 2015, a research group fed an AI system medical data from about 700,000 people and tested whether or not the system could predict diseases. The result was a success, but Deep Patient, as it was called, provides no explanation for the basis of a diagnosis. And the researchers have no idea how it comes to its conclusions. As a doctor, you can either trust or ignore the computer, but you can't query it for more info. Now, researchers are working on explainable AI. And while there will be advances in this field, there seems to be a trade-off between capability and explainability. Explanations are a cognitive shorthand used by humans, sort of suited for the way humans make decisions. Forcing an AI to produce explanations seems to be an additional constraint that could affect the quality of its decisions. In the near term, at least, AI is becoming more opaque and even less explainable. So let's talk about reward hacking. I said that AIs don't solve problems in the same way that people do. They will invariably stumble on solutions that we humans might have never anticipated, and some of them will subvert the intent of the system. And this is because AIs don't think of it in terms of the implications, context, norms, and values that we humans share and take for granted. This is reward hacking. It involves achieving a goal, but in a way the AI's designers neither wanted nor intended. And the examples actually are pretty great. So there's a 2-person soccer simulation where the AI figured out that if it kicked the ball out of bounds, the goalie would have to throw the ball back into bounds and leave the goal unattended. There was a stacking simulation where an AI learned to flip a block upside down rather than stack it. There was an evolution simulation where an AI figured out that instead of running faster or getting bigger muscles, it can make itself tall enough to cross a distance finish line by falling over it. So these are all hacks. You can blame them on poorly specified goals or rewards, and you'd be correct. You can point out that they all occurred in simulated environments, and you'd also be correct. But the problem is more general. AIs will inadvertently hack systems in ways that we won't expect. There's a story of a researcher trying to teach a robot vacuum cleaner not to bump into things. And instead of learning how to not to bump into things, it learned to drive backwards because there were no bumper sensors back there. Any good AI system will naturally find hacks. If there are problems, inconsistencies, or loopholes in the rules, and if those properties lead to an acceptable solution as defined by the rules, then the AIs will find them. So we all learned about this problem as children. This is the King Midas story. So after the god Dionysus grants him a wish, Midas asks that everything he touches turn to gold. And Midas ends up starving and miserable when his food, drink, and daughter all turn to gold on touch. This is a specification problem. Midas programmed the wrong goal into the system. We also know that genies are very precise about the wording of wishes and can be maliciously pedantic when granting them. But here's the thing. There's no way to outsmart the genie. Whatever you wish for, he will always be able to grant it in a way that you wish he hadn't. The genie will always be able to hack your wish. The problem is that in human language and thought, goals and desires are always underspecified. We never describe all the options. We never include all the exceptions and caveats and provisos. We can't. Any goal we specify will naturally be incomplete. Now, this is largely okay in human interaction because people understand context and act in good faith. We're all socialized and we acquire common sense and we fill gaps in understanding with that context. So if I asked you to get me some coffee, you'd probably go to the nearest coffee pot and pour me a cup, or maybe walk to the corner coffee shop and buy one. You would not bring me a pound of raw beans. You would not buy a coffee plantation. You wouldn't look for the closest person holding a cup of coffee and rip it out of their hands. I wouldn't have to specify any of that. You would just know. Similarly, if I asked you to develop a technology that would turn things to gold on touch, you wouldn't build it so it starved the person using it. I wouldn't have to specify that. You would just know. We can't completely specify goals to an AI, and AIs won't be able to completely understand context. So in 2015, Volkswagen was caught cheating on emission controls tests. This isn't an AI story. Human engineers programmed a regular computer to cheat, but it illustrates the problem really well. So they programmed their engine to detect emission controls testing and to behave differently when being tested. And their cheat remained undetected for years because it's hard to figure out what software is doing. So if I asked you to design a car's engine control software to maximize performance while still passing all emissions tests, you wouldn't design the software to cheat without understanding that you were cheating. This isn't true for an AI. It'll think out of the box because it won't have a conception of the box. It won't understand that the Volkswagen solution undermines the intent of emission controls tests, or that's breaking the law. And unless the programmers specify the goal of not behaving differently when being tested, an AI might come up with the same hack. The programmers are satisfied, the accountants are ecstatic, and because of the explainability problem, no one will realize what the AI did. And yes, now that we know the Volkswagen story, we can explicitly set the goal to avoid that particular hack, but there are other hacks the programmers will not anticipate. The lesson of the genie is that there'll always be hacks the programmers will not anticipate. And the worry isn't limited to the obvious hacks. The greatest worry lies in the hacks that aren't obvious, the ones whose effects are subtle, like the Volkswagen hack. Now, we're already seeing the first generation of this. A lot has been written about recommendation engines, how they push people towards extreme content. They weren't programmed to do this. It's a property that naturally emerged. The algorithms learned to push extreme content because that's what people respond to. And this is important. It didn't take a bad actor to create this hack. A pretty basic automatic system found it on its own. So nothing I'm saying here will be news to AI researchers, and many are currently considering ways to defend against a goal and reward hacking. One solution is to teach AIs context. General term for this sort of research is value alignment. How do we create AIs that mirror our values? And you can think about solutions in terms of two extremes. The first is to explicitly specify those values. The other is to create AIs that learn our values, possibly by observing humans in action. Both are really difficult. So how realistic is anything I've said so far? The answer is it depends. The feasibility of any AI hacking depends on the specific system being modeled. For an AI to even start on optimizing a problem, let alone hacking a completely novel solution, all the rules of the environment need to be formalized in a way the computer can understand. Goals, known in AI as objective functions, need to be established. And the AI needs some sort of feedback on how well it's doing so it can improve its performance. Sometimes this is a trivial matter. For a game like Go, it's easy. The rules, objective, feedback, did you win or lose? They're all precisely specified. There's nothing outside those things to muddy the waters. And this is why most of the current examples of goal and reward hacking come from simulated environments. They're artificial and constrained. What matters is the ambiguity in a system. We can imagine feeding the world's tax laws into an AI because the tax code consists of formulas. But ambiguity still exists in some of those laws, and that's difficult to translate into code, which means AI will have trouble dealing with it. Most human systems are even more ambiguous. It's hard to imagine an AI coming up with a real-world sports hack like curving a hockey stick. The AI would have to understand not just the rules of the game, but the physiology of the players, aerodynamics of the stick and puck, and everything else. And this ambiguity ends up being a near-term security defense against AI hacking. It'll be a long time before AIs will be capable of modeling and simulating the ways that people work, before they're able to come up with novel ways to hack the legislative process. Probably the first place to look for AI hacking is in financial systems, since those rules are designed to be algorithmically tractable. And we can imagine equipping an AI with all the world's financial laws, plus all the world's news and information, and then giving it the goal of maximum profit. And my guess is that this isn't very far off. But here's the thing about AI. Advances are discontinuous and counterintuitive. Things that seem to be easy turn out to be hard, and things that seem to be hard turn out to be easy. We don't know until a breakthrough occurs. When I was a college student in the early 80s, we learned that the game of Go would never be mastered by a computer because of its enormous complexity. Not the rules, but the number of moves. And now a computer has beaten a human world champion. Some of it was due to advances in the science of AI, but most of it was just throwing more computing power at the problem. So while a world filled with AI hackers is still science fiction, it's not stupid science fiction. And we need to think about its implications now. So hacking is as old as humanity. We are creative problem solvers. We are loophole exploiters. We manipulate systems to serve our interests. We strive for more influence, more power, more wealth. And hacking has always been a part of that. Still, no humans maximize their own interests without constraint. Even sociopaths are constrained by the complexity of society, their own contradictory impulses, their reputation, punishment, limited time. These very human qualities limit hacking. So hacking changed when everything became computerized. Because of their formalism and complexity, computers are uniquely hackable. And today, everything is a computer. Right? Cars, appliances, phones, they're all computers. All of our social systems, taxation, finance, elections involve computers. But to date, hacking has exclusively been a human activity. Searching for new hacks requires expertise, creativity, time, and luck. When AI start hacking, everything will be changing. Everything will change again. They won't be constrained in the same ways or have the same limits as people. They'll think like aliens. AIs will change hacking's speed, scale, and scope. So speed is easy. Computers are much faster than people. A human creative process that might take months or years could get compressed to hours, days, seconds. What might happen when you feed an AI the entire US tax code? Or in the case of multinational, the entire world's tax codes? Like, will it figure out without being told that it's smart to incorporate in Delaware or register your ship in Panama? How many loopholes will it find that we don't already know about? Dozens, hundreds, thousands? We have no idea. And it's not just speed, it's scale as well. Once AI systems start discovering hacks, they'll be able to exploit them at a scale we're not ready for. Now, we're already seeing shadows of this with AI-generated text. And AI text generation bots, soon they'll be replicated in millions across social media, engaging in issues around the clock, posting billions of messages, overwhelming any actual online human discussions. What we're going to see as voices put up the debate will just be bots arguing with other bots. And that will influence what we think is normal and what we think others think. The increasing scope of AI systems also makes hacks more dangerous. AIs are already making important decisions that affect our lives. Decisions we used to believe were the exclusive purview of humans. They make bail and parole decisions. They help decide who receives bank loans. AI screen job candidates, applicants for college, people apply for government services. And as AIs get more capable, society will cede more and more important decisions to them. This means that hacking of these systems becomes more damaging. And these hacks will be perpetrated by the powerful against us, because that's who own the AI systems. And while we have societal systems that deal with hacks, they were developed when hackers were human and reflect the pace of human hackers. We do not have any system of governance that can deal with hundreds, let alone thousands, of newly discovered tax loopholes. We won't be able to recover from an AI figuring out unanticipated but legal hacks on financial systems. At computers' speed, scale, and scope, hacking becomes a problem that we as society can no longer manage. All right, finally, let's talk about defense. Go back to software vulnerability finding. When AIs are able to discover new software vulnerabilities, it will be an incredible boon to hackers everywhere. They'll be able to use those vulnerabilities to hack computers, networks around the world. It'll put us all at risk. But that same technology will be useful to the defense as well. So imagine how a software company might deploy a vulnerability finding AI on its own code. It can identify and then patch all, or at least all the automatically discoverable vulnerabilities in its products before releasing them. This feature could be even built into software development tools, happen automatically. We can imagine a future where software vulnerabilities are a thing of the past. Of course, the transition period will be dangerous. Right? New code might be secure, but legacy code will still be vulnerable. And there, the attackers will have an advantage. But over the long run, an AI technology that finds software vulnerabilities favors the defense. It's the same when we turn to hacking broader social systems. Sure, AI hackers might find hundreds of vulnerabilities in the existing tax code, but that same technology can be used to evaluate potential vulnerabilities in any proposed tax law or tax ruling. So imagine a new tax law being tested in this way. Someone, it could be a legislator, a watchdog organization, the press, could take the text of a bill and find all the exploitable vulnerabilities. Doesn't mean that the tax loopholes will get fixed, but it means they become public and part of the policy debate. And in theory, they can be patched before the rich and powerful exploit them. So here too, the transition period is dangerous. But while AI hackers can be employed by both the offense and the defense, in the end, the defense will prevail. So ensuring that the defense prevails also requires building resilient governing structures that can quickly and effectively respond to the hacks. It won't do any good if it takes years to update the tax code, or if a legislative hack becomes so entrenched that it can't be patched. Modern software is continuously patched. You know how often you update your phones and computers. We need society's rules and laws to be similarly patchable. Now, this is a hard problem in modern governance, kind of well beyond the scope of this talk. It's also not a substantially different problem than building governing structures that can operate at the speed and complexity of the information age. The overarching solution here is people, though. What I've been describing is the interplay between human and computer systems and the risks inherent when the computers start doing the part of humans. This, too, is a more general problem than AI hackers. It's also one that technologists and futurists are writing about. And while it's easy to let technology lead us into the future, we are much better off as society if we together decide what technology's role in our future should be. And this is something we all need to figure out now before these AIs come online and start hacking our world. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Let me start off with a question, actually one that also builds a bit of a historical arc. You were interestingly, you were saying, the problems you were talking about were not new problems. So one older version, one older presentation of this kind of problem that came to my mind is actually going back all the way to Norbert Wiener, one of the pioneering people in cybernetics who wrote at a time when computation was just being rolled out and cybernetics was mostly an analog technology, really, which is why Norbert Wiener was not as influential as he himself might have hoped, even though some of the stuff is circling back in now. But he, towards the end of his life, around 1960, he wrote a fascinating little book, Bruce, you probably know this, God and Golem, on God and Golem, where he explores basically future scenarios around also artificial intelligence. And he actually tells a story about a couple in England that is confronted with it's a monkey paw in the story, a magic monkey paw that fulfills wishes. And what they're asking of the monkey paw is to receive a sum of £200. kind of a more money back then than it would be today, but still a humble wish. And so they wish that of the monkey paw, and the monkey paw has the power to fulfill these wishes. And a minute later, there's a knock at the door, and the representative of the company where their son works comes and tells them that the son was just killed in an accident, and hands them the sum of 200 pounds as compensation, for the death of the son. So this is a way of fulfilling the wish, right? That they
This is my pedantic and mean genie.
Yeah, exactly. That's the yeah, exactly. So this is where clearly as a human, it's the under specificity point that you made, right? So they fail to specify the myriad conditions under which they definitely would not want to receive that money. Yeah? But that actually leads me to my question. So you were emphasized why a driving theme, and what you were arguing is that that there will be hacking. AI will do hacking, and that is because of this disconnect, right? That comes as also expressed in the explainability problem, that for humans there's always a lot of implied context, presuppositions that we don't state, and AI in that sense is an alien intelligence, as illustrated by my move 37. In the Go play, right? And so we can expect that since AI doesn't have these presuppositions built in. But so I'm trying to understand how possible it will be to prevent AI hacking, because here's a version of being a naive optimist about this. Couldn't one think, so we're designing systems, and before we are releasing them into the wild, deploy them for official purposes, we bring AI in the lab context, and basically, since AI can do these things enormously fast, so we basically let it explore any which way in which a system can be hacked, and we fix each one. And we fix them at great speed because that's how AI operates. So is this naive optimism that AI can be used? Our AI can be used to make sure that some other AI, their AI or independent AI, cannot do that. This cannot pull this hacking on us.
So I think that's part of the solution. Like AIs watching each other, just like humans watch each other. I mean, that's right. And AIs do it at AI speed. Thinking about it, I think just all the possibilities of hacking are just too great to notice them all. So I'm going to make this up. We put an AI in a simulated environment, and we see what it does. And when it breaks the rules, when it hacks, we add the constraint. So we have to notice that it's a hack. So the Volkswagen story shows how hard that can be. We might not realize it's a hack. It's just they got a clever solution, but we don't realize the harm until 5 years later, when our sons are dying and people are getting 200 pounds in the mail, because it's the effects aren't immediate. And I think some of the avenues of hacking won't be obvious until the AI is in the actual environment, because the actual environment will be different than a simulated environment. So I think that's part of it, but I don't think we close all the avenues off. I mean, the research in value alignment feels more promising. That can we teach some general notion of common sense and context and actually humanity in a way that it'll understand in general what harm means, or what hacking means, or what subversion means. But it won't just follow the letter of the rules. So I don't know. I mean, I think there is going to be solution. They'll be partial. And I think you have part of it, but I don't think anything's going to solve it because of all the possible avenues for attack. And up to now, the attacker has an advantage over the defender because it is easier. But this idea I thought of finding all the potential avenues of a hack of the target with an attacking AI when we can fix them. That feels a little safer than testing the AI to make sure it doesn't become a hacker.
Right. So let me just push back a little bit on from the standpoint of my naive optimism here. So
I like naive optimists. We need more of them.
You need more of that, yeah. So it's not really in my nature, but I just gonna keep wearing that hat for a little bit longer. But so you say it is very hard to anticipate all possible avenues of attack, and yes, of course. But in a way, aren't you there then still speaking from the human experience? Of course, we are putting systems out there, and anything we do. Really any solution you put in place, any conflict resolution, anything that involves, asking people to follow a system of rules, somebody will figure out a way of how to take advantage, right? So in a way, the ubiquity of hacking, yeah. But that is also because we are those of us who are putting things out there do this with the limitations of the human brain, right? So if we deploy AI and they go over this like a million in 5 minutes, a million possibilities in 5 minutes, after 3 hours, we have explored it all. No, is that too naive?
So I think that's interesting. I haven't thought of it this way. So kind of what you're saying is we're going to invent rules 2.0. Rules 1.0 are human rules for humans. Rules 2.0 are AI generated rules for other AIs. Yeah. And maybe that arms race, right? Yeah. Developing rules and subverting rules, the developer of rules will prevail.
Yeah.
I have not thought about that. That is interesting. Maybe.
Yeah, but naively optimistic. Yeah.
All right, I'm game. That's actually best new idea I've heard in a long time.
Well, there must be this must be the kind of thing that ultimately. Just like there is in social choice theory, right? There's formal theorems around these things, right? So there's a formal notion in preference aggregation, there's a formal notion of manipulability, and then there's a famous theorem, it's one of the crown jewels of formal economic theory, known as the Gibbard-Satterthwaite theorem, that shows that no system of aggregation is actually foolproof, right? They can all be manipulated.
I think that's right. I think it's like a Gödel-like incompleteness theorem. That all systems of rules have inconsistencies.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's probably massive avenues for further research there, and both formal research. And anyway, Sushma, you had a question also. Let me turn over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. Fascinating talk, and really excited to pick up your new book. I'm wondering, given that we are housed at a Human Rights Center, what you see as the obvious and perhaps not so obvious implications of AI hacking for human rights and for the overall human rights movement?
So I think I elided that in one sentence when I said that these hacks will probably be perpetrated by the rich and powerful against us. These are going to be major AI systems that'll be finding these hacks. They're not going to be owned by us. They're going to be owned by Google. They're going to be owned by Amazon or Goldman Sachs. The organizations that are going to find hacks in the tax code are going to use them for their advantage at the expense of us. So I worry that, especially with AI development in general, because it is so resource intensive, both in data and computing power and researchers, that it exacerbates existing fault lines in society, that it makes the rich and powerful richer and more powerful. So, I mean, eventually, as this becomes democratized, we can see it as a technological equalizer. But at least initially, I think it makes the disparities in society worse. And that's dangerous. And we worry about them becoming entrenched in a way that makes them hard to dislodge.
So if I could ask a follow-up question, that if this is really concentrated in the hands of a few global corporations, are there ways to think about governance and regulation that may not be possible if this was more diffuse?
It's interesting. I worry, certainly in the US context, just that that feedback loop between monopoly power and more favorable laws giving you more monopoly power. And I worry that this will exacerbate that feedback loop. I mean, as a point of regulation, it would be nice to see these tools in the hands of researchers or universities or civil society groups, and I think government has a hand in making that happen. There, I'm going to look to Europe more than the US. I think Europe's more willing to do something like that than the US is. But these are all near-term problems, and I like to think that we as a society will do better long-term. I don't think anytime soon. I don't know. I tend to be near-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic.
Naively or sophisticatedly?
Both.
Let me, before turning, I have another question I'd like to ask you, but let me also encourage the audience again, please, do feel free to put your questions in the chat. We will be integrating them. Let me ask you something else, Bruce, about what's currently going on. So, we have this, you kind of give us a big picture situation, and, we're talking, something mostly, we don't quite know how speedily all this will be unfolding. But it's not been primarily about what's happening right now. But let me ask you about that. What is happening right now as a cybersecurity person watching the scene globally with AI kind of looming on the radar? What's the kind of topic that you're thinking about for Schneier on security or other outlets? What's on your mind right now?
So it's what I said near the end of the talk, where I talked about the AI text generation bots. They're getting better. And sort of historically, they've been confined to large-scale propaganda. So producing news articles and producing big things that are disseminated. What we're going to see the rise of is what Latanya Sweeney at Shorenstein has called persona bots. So these are AIs that might be in a 10-person chat group for some hobbyist club. And they're behaving normally, but occasionally will say something political or say something inflammatory. And now we can have millions of these. So it's not just one AI saying things that's distributed, it's a million AIs saying little things. And that really worries me, because our socialization is, we very quickly assign human emotions and agency to the most ridiculous things. And if something is in your chat room with your book club or model railroad club or knitting group or your drone flying club or your political chat, right, and they're acting regular and normal and they're a friend, and now they're being sort of pushing you a little bit on one political side, that is a really obvious tactic. Very near term. You can probably do it today. And that's because of the scale. I can deploy these at a huge scale. So I worry about that a lot, that AI is basically manipulating human discourse in a way that cannot be detected.
So they're acting in a friendly way until
they're acting normal, right? They're acting like you and I. And honestly, video technology is such that we could probably have this conversation.
Right. Right. Is there anything, there's one minor follow-up, is there anything specifically around the Ukraine war that has the specific cybersecurity dimension, or from your point of view, is this mostly conventional war?
It is conventional. I think what we learned is that cyber weapons are much less valuable once the shooting starts. That they're useful in that run-up, what we call the gray zone, from, I don't know, from cooperation to conflict. But once shooting starts, they're much less effective. Russia had almost nothing. They had something that disabled some satellites in the beginning. They tried to do a major wipe against the government that failed, and like nothing's happened. There's now talk that they're planning something, but we're going to see. And my guess is that compared to bombs and guns and tanks and planes, cyber attack just isn't that interesting. But in peacetime, it's a way to move into that conflict space without triggering any laws of war. And they seem interesting. And we're going to see AIs doing this too. I mean, here I think AIs have a near-term defensive benefit because the attacks are already happening at computer speeds. Defenses happen at human speeds. And if an AI can make decisions and defend at computer speeds, that's valuable. But of course, AIs fighting AIs in war sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't want that.
Sushma, back to you.
Thank you, Matthias. So, Bruce, I wanted to touch on the issue of trust. A global trust barometer said that distrust is now the default emotion for society.
Do we trust that data?
And you write and speak about the issue of cognitive hacking, and that many of the systems that we rely on, democracy, you touched on voting, for example, these depend on humans making decisions. And so I'm curious if you could talk a bit about the connection between AI hacking and its implications, not only in the immediate or short run, but also long run in terms of the changes and ways in which humans perceive social systems, societies, build trust with each other, and so on.
I think there's a real risk when computers take the place of humans. Right? Trust is a fundamental human concept. Society doesn't exist without it. We do it so often, so naturally, you don't even notice it. And computers abuse trust because we ascribe kind of human qualities to them. And some of it's basic, right? The computer never makes a mistake. Right? Remember that from like the 60s, 70s, that computers were fallible. We assumed they weren't. I think there is a worry when AIs are trying to be persuasive. Even basic systems like recommendation engines can be very powerful. I think there's a bunch of moral panic here. I mean, the story of Cambridge Analytica, where supposedly they were able to identify people based on personality types and craft advertising messages, either for products or for candidates that targeted your particular psychology. I think that was largely overrated and wasn't very effective. But in all of these things, the computers always get better, right? They're mediocre now, they're going to improve. And I think there will be a time when individually crafted messages tailored to your psyche, to your mood, can be efficiently delivered. In some very basic study I made a few years ago is that we are more susceptible to advertising when the image in the advertisement looks like us. So basic things like the same ethnicity, same gender, but also when the facial features look like us. And there are ways that you can morph images of a person with a generic image to make an image that looks sort of like me but doesn't look like me in a way I wouldn't detect it consciously, but it will affect me unconsciously. Right? So it's going to be things like that. I worry that when computers get better at cognitive hacking, whether it's hacking our sense of tribalism, our sense of trust, our sense of fear, any of these things, they'll be effective. They're mediocre now, and there's a moral panic right now, I think, but that will change. They will get better because computers get better at everything sooner or later.
Since it seems we don't have questions from the audience, let me go back actually to one of your key terms, namely the explainability, right? The explainability problem, what explainability might mean. And you illustrated it very, very nicely with the famous 42. So the meaning of life is 42, and by the time this of course is the computational devices of the 1970s, right? So it took a while for these computers to figure that out. And but so I wonder maybe there's some additional illumination we could have on that problem. So the Go situation, AlphaGo making move 37. And yeah, as you said, this was something that there's the famous video of that where Lee Sedol just kind of visibly is taken back.
And every commentator on television is doing the same thing. Yeah. And the person who put the move down looks at the computer and looks again. Did I make a mistake? Could that possibly be right? Yeah, it's really an amazing scene.
Right. But so, of course, so literally taking people aback, right? Everybody who knows anything about Go was taken back. But at the same time, if we're asking, what would we be asking for an explanation here? So then you ask, how would the computer arrive at this is one question. Does it make sense? As in, does it hold up strategically? Is another question. And it seems these are questions, these two questions, at least in principle, they can be answered, right? So how did the computer arrive at that is going to be some version of what it looked at a gazillion recorded Go games, right? And that's how it did this. And the other version, the other part of the explanation question, is did it make sense? Well, yeah, it held up, right? It held up, so it just kind of was, the justifiability is there. So then if you compare that to human actions, right? So there's this famous example that's always given about human irrationality, like the judges sentencing behavior varies with whether it's before lunch or after lunch. And so of course the judges, then they would pass a sentence and they would tell you something about why they did that. But in a way, so the point of putting these two phenomena together next to each other is explainability really so much harder for AI than it is for the human case, once we understand in the human case that what people say, why they are doing things, often just has little to do with why they're actually doing it. Yeah.
So I think you're right, and I agree with you that for humans, explanations are basically justifications. And just like we can't open the computer up and figure out what it's doing, we can't open up the human brain and figure out what it's doing. So you talk about two things. One is you say, what is the process the computer used to get the answer, and the other is, does it hold up? I think this is the only one that's an explanation. And I think the problem here is there might be a 30-volume book of what the computer did that no human can comprehend, that it is just too complex for human to understand the explanation. There isn't the kind of shorthand. The justification, does it hold up? I think is what we use today. So a bunch of years ago, the LA Police Department was found by the court of being racist. Now, we don't know how the police officers make their decisions. We didn't open up their brains. We didn't ask for the explanation. We just looked at the results. You people are racist. Stop being racist. I don't care how you stop being racist, just you can't do it. So there, right, we're looking at the effects. We're looking at the output and saying, is it what we want? So I don't care about explanation. You give me all the reasons you want of why the LAPD is racist, and none of it matters. All that matters is that it was. I think the same thing is going to hold true for AI. Right? How it got to that famous move in the game of Go, we will never know. But if it holds up, if that was a strategic move, maybe we humans can learn from it. And in fact, there's been a lot of stuff written on that move and rethinking Go strategy from a more strategic perspective, which is what that move did. And the way AlphaZero plays Go, which AlphaZero is the follow-on program to AlphaGo. AlphaGo learned how to play Go by basically looking at all of human Go playing. AlphaZero learned how to play Go just by playing itself. And AlphaZero plays Go super weird. It doesn't play human Go at all. So, right, there's some rethinking now that we can look what the computer did, and maybe learn from it. There is that kind of feedback loop. But it is more, does it hold up, than how did you get there?
Let me pass on two questions from the audience now. So Lisa is asking, do you think that the rich and powerful, for example, Google or large governments, are aware enough of the risks that using AI as a weapon may lead to it blowing up in their faces? That's
I don't know. It's hard to believe they... Okay, go.
Let me give you another one right away, then you can take them together. Caitlin is asking, how can human rights professionals, who may be one source of some of the moral panic, help in addressing the regulation and the governance issues? Maybe we can take these two together.
All right. Now, so I worry that corporations are concerned with short-term profits and tend not to think about long-term risks. I think Facebook is a prime example of short-term profits outweighing risks to democracy. Not an AI involved; these are just humans. But I don't think they're good, and nor should we expect corporations to do that. That it's our job as a society to rein corporations in. I do worry about the moral panic. I mean, it's really easy. I mean, we get a lot of our views of AI from fiction. Just like we get a lot of our views on how the police work from fiction. That makes a really bad social discourse. You know, we are terrible at knowing what's really happening and figuring out how to effectively, as society, deal with it, because our input is all from fiction. So, right, there's a moral pet, there's this belief that AI will be general. I mean, the robots of movies and television is what we think about. We don't think about specialized AI. We don't think about how AIs really make decisions or how they are controlled. You know, I want, you know, really what I want, civil society and government, I need more tech capability. You know, for years, I have been talking about public interest technology, the notion that technologists need to get involved in public policy. And I need technologists on legislative staffs, in NGOs, as part of the press. Because right now, there isn't anyone to push back from the corporate narrative. So, you know, if I was an NGO, I wanted to be a staff technologist. The way you push back against the moral panic is with knowledge. So I want more people who can bridge that gap in tech and policy. And that's what we're missing. I think that's why the debate is so one-sided. That's an excellent note to end on.
So, Bruce, that's actually is an excellent note to end on. And the closing question I had for you was connecting to actually the closing remarks that you made in your talk, where you talk about not necessarily having technology lead us into the future, but really thinking about how as society, if we decide what should be technology's role in our future. So are there any other examples that you could give us in terms of ways in which we could be more proactive?
I think we're terrible at society being proactive, especially against technology that moves faster than in government. But here again, it's what I'm saying, that I need people who understand technology in government, in civil society. That, you know, the sort of the libertarian tech bro vision of the future is that we build it for the short-term financial benefit of a bunch of tech billionaires, which is a dumb way to organize society. But it's what we got, because that's who's leading. And that was okay when it didn't matter. That was okay when it was Friendster and nobody cares. It's not okay when it's Facebook and affecting political discourse. It's not okay when it's monopoly destroying, you know, townships. That these technology now shapes the world, and something that powerful needs to be decided by the world. And this is hard. We are terrible at proactive. We are a reactive species, but the feedback loops are so fast now that I'm not sure we can afford that anymore.
So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Carr Center, Bruce, for joining us today for this conversation. Fascinating discussion and presentation. I'm definitely going to check out your upcoming book, and
either January or February, we don't know which.
For those of you who are watching, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to our newsletter, where you can learn about upcoming events like these that are available and accessible on our YouTube page as well as live. So thank you all for joining.
And thank you very much.